Hi, and welcome to Studying with Joy. I'm Joy Brasington, and I'm with Christian World TV. I have a very special study for you today, and I'm going to be introducing Dr. Scott Stripling. Dr. Stripling is the Director of Excavation and Chief Archaeologist at Ancient Shiloh in Israel. He's been there from 2017 to the present. He also serves as Provost and Director of the Archaeological Institute at the Bible Seminary in Katy, Texas, just near the Houston area. He's the author of many academic articles and appears on documentaries, podcasts, and popular media programs. One of his books is The Trowel and the Truth. I encourage you to pick up a copy. It's very, very interesting. So today he took time to meet with me at the 3J Museum in Katy and shared a beautiful message about Christmas and Hanukkah, and he shows us artifacts that came straight from biblical times that they have excavated. So I know you're going to enjoy this time with Dr. Stripling, and you're going to learn so much. So let's head over to the museum and meet Dr. Stripling now. Hi friends, my name is Joy Brasington, and you're watching Studying with Joy. Today I'm really excited. We are actually at a different location than we normally are. I'm here at the 3J Museum, which stands for Joshua, Judges, and Jesus. And I have a special guest, Dr. Scott Stripling, and he's going to be explaining some stuff to us. Since we're in the month of December, I thought it would be great to just kind of come and get some biblical viewpoints of what was going on during that time period, and talk about Hanukkah and Christmas. And he can give us some insights into Hanukkah and what was going on during history and things that they have unearthed over, with his digs in Israel and locations. So I'm really excited to have Dr. Scott Stripling with us today, archaeologist and just all kinds of things.
Well, thanks.
So thank you.
Thank you, Joy. It's good to be with you. We're kind of tucked into a little nook here at our museum, and it's an interesting time period. Galatians 4:4 says, in the fullness of time, God sent his son into the world. So one of the questions that we ask is, what was happening in the world at that time, preparing it for the coming of Jesus? And one of the main things is this guy right behind us, and this is none other than Alexander the Great, the son of Philip of Macedon. And Alexander conquered the world in 332 BC, and as a result, he imposed Hellenism upon the Mediterranean world. And this is forced adoption of Greek language and culture, which includes polytheism. Now, this is fine unless you happen to be a monotheist, and that doesn't go so well, and that leads us into our story. But so the viewers can picture what's going on. After Alexander's death, his kingdom is divided among his 4 generals. This is talked about in the book of Daniel. And 2 of them become very powerful. 2 of them cease to exist. You have the Seleucids up in Syria and the Ptolemies down here in Egypt. So like Cleopatra, for example, is ruling Egypt. She's not Egyptian. She's a Greek princess. She's a Ptolemaic princess. And so you've got, essentially, Egypt is under Greek occupation at this time. So the Seleucids in the north, the Ptolemies in the south, and then in between, who do we have? We have that's right. The Israelites are trapped in between these 2 world powers, and it's a tug of war that's going on. And this is where the story heats up, because the Seleucids attempt to force conversion to Hellenism upon the Jews. And this means forced circumcision. It means disallowance of circumcision. It means forced to offer incense to the emperor and to worship these Greco-Roman gods. Well, one family refuses to do it, and their story is super interesting. And if we move to the next section, I'll tell you about them.
Okay, let's go.
All right. And so this is where the story heats up, because Antiochus IV, we call him Antiochus Epiphanes, we have his coin just here behind us, is the one who's behind all of this. He actually comes to Jerusalem and he offers a pig on the altar in Jerusalem. And so this defiles the altar, and this ends the sacrificial system for 3.5 years. This Hasmonean family, or Maccabean family as they call them, was down in a place called Modin. And when they attempted to force them to sacrifice to these Greek gods, the father, Mattathias, essentially ran this general through with a spear and shouted out, "All who are zealous for the God of Israel, come with me." And this set off an enormous revolt. And this is in the year 167 BC, or what we sometimes call the intertestamental period. Now, you have to understand the Jews are a very small, weak nation at this point, and they're fighting a very powerful nation in the Seleucids. But somehow, kind of like David and Goliath, they are able to win. And after 3.5 years, they rededicate the temple in Jerusalem. And this is what the word Hanukkah means. It means dedication. And there is a miracle that's involved with this. And you probably have heard about this miracle.
Sure have. Well, we're excited to learn a little bit more. We're going to move to another part of the museum and pick up right from there. So as you can see, we've moved to a new location in the museum, and Dr. Stripling is going to kind of explain to us how that period was archaeologically, what he has discovered on some of his digs. So go ahead and explain to us what you found.
Well, I think viewers might find it interesting that the deeper we go in an archaeological site, the older the material becomes. So we know, for example, when we get below the Herodian level, we anticipate that next we're going to get into this Hasmonean period material if the site was occupied at that time. And indeed, that's what we have found. And so when we talk about the miracle of Hanukkah, it involves oil. So you take an oil juglet like this, and this is poured into a lamp. Now, the lamps that are used at this time are the pinched, what we call a pinched Hasmonean lamp. And so the oil is poured in here. You always carry oil with you when you travel. Think about the Good Samaritan.
Right.
He had oil in his...
Would this be olive oil, or what oil would this be?
Yes, it's olive oil.
Okay.
And then there's a wick that goes in the end that is made of flax.
Okay.
It's a flax wick, and indoor this is fine. It burns. Now, if you're going to take it outdoors, it's going to have to go inside a lantern.
Right.
But if not, then this is fine. It sits on a lamp. Now, when we talk about what was life like at that period of time, this is the type of lamp that they were using during the time of the original Hanukkah. Now, in our museum, of course, December 18th through 26th, as I was telling you, we're going to be lighting these lamps that have not been lit since biblical times. Exciting. And, of course, we're going to have a fire extinguisher on hand. We don't know if this is going to work or not. But each day we'll be lighting a new, literally, a Hanukkah lamp, along with a menorah as well, to help us understand this, this holiday that Jesus himself celebrated.
Right. So tell us more about that in Scripture. Where do we see Hanukkah in Scripture?
This is a good question. We read about the original story of Hanukkah in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Now, this is literature between the Old Testament and the New Testament, what we sometimes call apocryphal literature, but it's extremely important to us. I always tell our students, first I'd like for you to read all 66 books of the Bible, but once you're into that, we really do need to delve into the Apocrypha too, because there's so much happening between Malachi and Matthew. And so we get in 1st and 2nd Maccabees the story that I was just briefly telling of how the Seleucids attempt this forced conversion, how the Jews resisted, and how God saves them. Now, the miracle itself is interesting. They only have enough oil to last for 1 day, but the oil burns for 8 days. And so this is beautiful. They were not able to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles that year because of the war that they were fighting. Feast of Tabernacles lasts for 8 days. So they decide that this new celebration is going to run 8 days, sort of a mirror of the Feast of Tabernacles. And this miracle of the oil then is enacted each year in the lighting of the menorah and, of course, the other lamps that we're going to be lighting this year.
Right. And do we see Hanukkah mentioned in the New Testament?
Well, that's a great question. Before I get to the New Testament, let's talk about just before the New Testament. The most common coin that we excavate, what's often called a widow's mite. You see that star on there?
Yes.
Okay. Think back to Numbers 24, the prophecy of Numbers 24 of a star rising, this Messianic prophecy. Now, this was very dominant in the thought of early Second Temple period Judaism and late Second Temple period Judaism. And this star represents that Messianic hope, that a Redeemer is coming. Of the 1,322 coins that we excavated at our previous dig site, half of them were this coin.
Oh my goodness.
Half of them were this coin. That's how common it is. That's why we sometimes call this the widow's mite, because it was very common. But the picture also is very important. Now, I want you to realize at the time of Jesus, this coin was already about 150 years old, but it's still in circulation. Why? The Jewish population prefers the older Hasmonean coins to the Roman coins because they have pagan images on them, and they're under foreign occupation. So it's sort of a form of passive resistance. So this star reminds us of the Star of Bethlehem that is going to come. And it's a clear Messianic prophecy. And so they write about this, and they believe that that's what this represents, is one day a Redeemer is coming. And then, of course, his star does come and it shines. And one of the things we're talking about is the real story of Christmas. People have heard a lot of things about the pagan origins of Christmas, and it wasn't December 25th and so forth. Well, let's just think about Hanukkah, which this year, of course, Hanukkah and Christmas coincide. We're on what we call the Gregorian calendar, and then they have the Hebrew calendar, and so they don't always coincide, but this year they do. So it's an 8-year celebration. Guess what day Hanukkah is celebrated? The 25th of Kislev, which is the equivalent of our December. Okay. So now we're tapping into this theme of light. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. We have a star that came and stayed over this manger. And of course, this is a manger, a first century manger right here. And so they're inside this complex, what the New Testament calls a kataluma. And here is the manger that the baby would have been laid in, something just like this. So when we look at the archaeology behind this, the coins, the lamps, the mangers, it gives us what we would call a sitzum leben, or a real life context for what's going on at that time. Now, I think the real thing you want to get down to is, does the New Testament talk about any of this? And of course, the answer is yes. In John chapter 10, Jesus himself celebrates Hanukkah. So it's called the Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication, or the Feast of Lights. And so we see Jesus in the temple courts, and it's the Feast of Dedication. I mean, the typical person reading the New Testament just sort of breezes over that. But try to go back and find that in the Old Testament. Well, it's not there. You've got to read that intertestamental literature and realize that Jesus himself is part of this celebration. And could there be anything more appropriate than a celebration of light, a celebration of dedication? And aren't those the real messages of Christmas?
Absolutely. So as believers and Christians, so Hanukkah is not something to be afraid of or hands off.
No.
So as a believer, how do you incorporate Hanukkah into maybe your family or your life and celebration during that time of year?
Well, that's a great question. This year, we're doing something super special by lighting these Hanukkah lamps. Now, I hope that every Christian, when they light their Christmas tree, when they have other forms of light that are part of Christmas, that it will remind them that Jesus is the light of the world, and that Jesus himself celebrated Hanukkah, which was the festival of light. There's a beautiful expression in Spanish to when a woman gives birth, which is the whole point of Christmas, right? That behold, unto us a child is born. To give birth is, in Spanish, dar la luz, to give light. You know, in English we say give birth, but in Spanish it's to give light. And what a beautiful reminder that unto us a child is born, and because of that child, we do have light in the world.
Man, that is just beautiful. Well, I hope you've learned a lot today. I know I have. I've enjoyed this museum. I hope to come back in the future. There's a lot of other areas that we can explore with Dr. Stripling. But just in this season, you know, when you see light, if you see a menorah, just smile, you know, let that remind you of Jesus, that he is the light of the world. You know, if you have Jewish friends, just celebrate with them. Happy Hanukkah. Don't be afraid of those terms. There are terms that you can, like, you know, embrace and know that, you know, we are celebrating Jesus, and it's not just maybe for the Jewish people, that we can share in that that time and be thankful for it. So thank you again so much for sharing all of this knowledge with us, and we look forward to maybe coming back again soon.
Thank you for being here, Joy. Blessings.
Thanks. Wasn't that an amazing visit with Dr. Stripling? I hope you learned a little more about Hanukkah and the miracle that happened there as the lamp burned for 8 days. As Dr. Stripling mentioned, he is hosting Hanukkah to Christmas, a celebration of light. Each night at sundown, each evening, he's going to be lighting one of the lamps that they have excavated, as well as a menorah throughout the Hanukkah season. That runs from December 18th through 26th of 2022. So if you're in the Houston area, try and make it out to one of those nights. You will really enjoy it. You'll learn so much. You'll get to walk around the museum. And if you want more information, visit the website Thebibleseminary.edu, and you can find out more details about the time and the address and location. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd love to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah. Goodbye.